Silence is a 2016 film starring Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver, and Liam Neeson. This movie takes place in the 17th century and is about a pair of missionaries going to Japan to save their mentor and along the way help the locals with their Christian faith. When I first came across this film, I was shocked to find out it was directed by Martin Scorsese, who for me at the time was only known for highly violent gangster films, and a film about missionaries seemed to be out of his usual work. So I was very excited to see a different approach by him. Andrew Garfield also sticks out because this is his second role where he plays a man struggling with his faith, as seen in HACKSAW Ridge, another great movie about belief. The first thing you notice when watching the film is just how beautiful it looks. The cinematographer, Rodrigo Pererto, who had worked with Scorsese on The Wolf of Wall Street and his latest film, The Irishman, really outdoes himself with the immersion of the setting. The landscapes are just gorgeous, and the indoor scenes really show you just how cramped, small, and scared most of the time the missionaries are. But as well as the technical aspects are and how good the plot is, the biggest pull for me in this film is its religious subject. As a practicing Christian myself, I found this film very challenging towards what I would imagine missionary work as, and how others who didn't grow up Christian, or at least in a culture built on Christian and Jewish beliefs, would see the faith. Not that you need to be religious to enjoy or understand this film, just that it does put a different perspective on it, especially when it comes to specific characters, like in the one of Kijiro, one of the Japanese Christians that gives up the Christian faith so that he could live and not be executed, who very much mirrors Judas from the Bible, but with an important twist. Our two main missionaries, Rodriguez and Garape, respectively, are sent to Japan as the last two Jesuits that will ever go to Japan and to find Father Ferreira, who in a letter has said that he has left the faith. But before they can do any rescuing, they need a guide to get there. That's where Kijiro comes in, who when we first meet him is a homeless drunk sleeping in filth. And this is where a lot of the conflict in the film happens with our main character, Rodriguez. He needs to trust Kijiro and does on many occasions, but multiple times in the film, Kijiro betrays him and asks for forgiveness, and more than once as Kijiro denounces faith, only to come back and say that he's still a Christian. Rodriguez is a proud Jesuit, meaning he loves his work and he loves the Lord, but in the film we see this overfocus on himself leads him to judge and look down on Kijiro for being spineless, and the gruesome deaths of many other Japanese Christians. But before we can get to all that, we need to cover two topics that the film openly discusses: death and what's worth dying for, and the culture of Japan. Many believers in any faith will often say that they are willing to die for their faith and count the sacrifices of those martyrs as good, and that's what our characters also believe. Rodriguez and Garape are willing to go on such a dangerous mission because they believe that even if they die, they will become martyrs, and the same goes for the ones they convert. In the film, we find out the Japanese government used to kill missionaries and converts directly, but this just led to more converts. So instead, they started torturing the converts and making the Christians watch, promising that they wouldn't stop until they set an example and apostatized. This proves to be effective, and exactly what happens to Father Ferreira. This also puts a lot of doubt and fear into Rodriguez because he's willing to die for his faith but hesitates to let others die for him to continue to have faith. The film talks about this directly. One scene near the end where the Japanese Christians are being tortured, Rodriguez turns his head away to pray and to cry out to the Lord, but Ferreira simply says that if he prays,
but pray with your eyes open.
And so what? Many are probably wondering, if they are Christians and they believe in an afterlife, then when they die, it's good. They go to a better place to be with Christ. Well, this is where the difference in culture comes in and really muddies the waters on dying for your faith. Early on in the film, we see Jesuits struggling to understand the Japanese Christians. Either they don't know enough Japanese or understand the context or culture of the words.
Bless me, Padre, for I have sinned.
Confession.
I have sinned.
Also, we see the Japanese overly focus on religious objects and the priests themselves. On first viewing, I really didn't notice or care about these details because it doesn't really move the plot along or affect our characters directly. But on multiple viewings, you see how this ties to some of the things Father Ferreira was talking about. Ferreira mentions that when missionaries first came to Japan to speak of the Son of God, they first had to find out how to refer to him in Japanese. And they did this by using the word for the physical sun. He then explains that the Japanese don't believe in something that transcends the human, only in the natural world. Therefore, they can't fully grasp the belief system of Christianity. This leads Rodriguez to doubt the past deaths, changing the converts from heroic martyrs for one's faith and into a tragic tale of disillusionment and misunderstanding.
For Deus, on fire with their faith.
Your martyrs may have been on fire, Father, but it was not with the Christian faith.
One of the better written characters in the story has to be the Inquisitor, who at first just seems like our evil villain that our hero must stand up to and in the end defeat. But the more we learn about the Inquisitor, the more we see that the Japanese officials are not fools to what Christianity is, and now know what not to fall for. And since Rodriguez knows nothing or barely knows anything about the culture, people, and religion of Japan, we see him fall multiple times into the Inquisitor's traps. And the funny thing is that the Inquisitor doesn't hate God or Christianity in any kind of basic one-noted fashion. In fact, he seems to have a different opinion on Christianity altogether, more than most people around him, who think that the faith is simply a disease to be destroyed.
I see it in another way, but still dangerous.
He understands the importance of it to the priest, but needs to do what he has to do because of other contributing factors that Christianity comes with. What he's worried about is the political battle taking place in Japan right now between the 4 European countries trying to influence it. He knows Japan is not ready to be open with the Europeans, and so must stop any movement to grab power and try to conquer his country. So his torturing is not done out of sick pleasure or hate, but simply a man trying to protect his country and what he believes in. He'd rather stop all the killing and pain, but can't due to the people standing behind the message of Christ trying to win Japan over. And this is where we see the breakdown of Rodriguez's character the most. Not only does he begin to doubt the importance of his mission, but starts to question his own faith and begins to fear death. This breakdown ultimately leads to the film's climax, whether or not Rodriguez will apostatize. I see a lot of people saying that Rodriguez shouldn't have apostatized and held on, and others saying that it was good because he saved the lives of the Japanese converts. But I would like to take it from a different perspective. I see this film not as a story about holding on to one's faith or whether or not we should convert other cultures that might not completely understand it, but Rodriguez's personal journey of overcoming his pride and finally treating Kijiro like Jesus would. Rodriguez compares himself to Christ and puts himself on a pedestal above those who do not follow Christ. This is his downfall and why he needed to apostatize. We see not only Rodriguez's arrogance, but of past Jesuits as well. One of the officials tells us that many Christians have come to Japan to teach but never to learn, the same way Rodriguez has.
All the time he lived here,
He taught, but would not learn.
he despised our language, our food, our customs.
I'm not like him. I'm not like Cabral.
Really?
We see that he takes pity on Kijiro, but only listens to his confessions out of duty, not because he actually believes he's actually trying to restore his soul. We see that Rodriguez is trying to pull God's will into what he thinks is right, and fights with his silence. At the end, when he finally steps on the face of Jesus, we hear God's voice, or at least what Rodriguez believes to be his voice.
Come ahead now. It's all right. Step on me. I understand your pain. I was born into this world to share men's pain.
And in this scene, to me, we see Rodriguez's pride fall. I find it very fitting that in Rodriguez's lowest moment, he finally finds the face of God. The Bible teaches us that Jesus would sacrifice his life for even one soul, that he would go through hell just to make sure that one of his children is not alone. This is what I see as Rodriguez's testimony, and ultimately, the message of the film. At the end, right before the movie closes out, we see Kijiro come to Rodriguez one last time and ask him to hear his confession. He refuses, stating that he's a fallen priest and that he cannot forgive Kijiro. And this is where we hear God's voice one last time saying that he never left Rodriguez's side and that he shared in his suffering.
I suffered beside you. I was never silent.
Rodriguez no longer holds any pride and finally sees Kijiro as an equal and loves him for who he is, perfectly mirroring Christ. Rodriguez comes to Japan not to become a martyr or to lead Spain into converting Japan into their beliefs in some flashy show of his faith, but to quietly sacrifice his life to save the soul of a man that was just like Judas, a traitor, a liar, and a sinner, just like the rest of us. Now, I know this isn't the only message one can get out of this film, and it's not the only one I get out of it on other viewings, but I really enjoy the complex ideas of faith and belief being put on screen without any cliche or basic answers. It's far above what most Christian-directed films do, and I highly recommend this film for anyone, whether they are religious or not.